Welcome to Fan Fave with Katrina. Fan Fave with Katrina. It's time to talk pop culture.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Katrina, and this is Fan Fave, the ultimate pop culture podcast for fans of all forms of entertainment. If you love music, television, film, theater, or anything in between, you're in the right place. Since the start of this podcast, I've had this idea of starting a series all about how fans turn their passions into full-time careers. I think there's just like a running joke on social media of like a fangirl to most commonly the music industry pipeline, but I think that totally exists, and not even just for the music industry, for so many different things, and I'll explain why it's an amazing thing in just a little bit. But over the weekend, Late Night with Seth Meyers and The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon both celebrated their 10-year anniversaries on NBC. And in that time, I was just thinking about how much I love these shows and have really been watching them for years, maybe even since they started, before I even had the opportunity to get to work as an intern for NBC and as an intern for The Tonight Show. And I just thought about how being in middle school, watching these shows, those were the things that helped to shape me even knowing like what I wanted to do with my life when I grew up. And then in college, I just literally got to achieve just that. I got to work at these shows. So I just thought that now is the perfect time to talk about my love for these two shows and my experience working in those spaces. So today is the start of this brand new Fan Fave series called Full Time Fan. This is a series where we're going to explore the fascinating journeys of people who have transformed their passion for pop culture into successful careers. And like I said, we begin today with talking about my journey in the entertainment industry as someone who started as a young fan on social media and quickly learned what I wanted to do based on the things that I opened myself up to. And we begin by talking about my journey in the entertainment industry as someone who started as a young fan on social media and quickly learned what I wanted to do based on the things that I opened myself up to and saw and experienced. The way that I found people in the industry to admire and look up to and just kind of shape my career paths around. We'll be talking all about my little journey today, and if you have an interest in interning at NBC for one of their late night shows or just in entertainment in general, I interned at NBC for 4 semesters. I also worked in the music industry for a little bit, and right now I still currently work in media, so I'll be sharing some career tips along the way too. But first, it's time for a pop recap. Let's talk about everything trending in the entertainment world that I have not been able to stop talking about since the last time that I spoke to you all. First, let's start off with the film industry because we have big news coming out of Marvel Studios. Marvel finally announced, I feel like we've been waiting for this like forever, like since Multiverse of Madness or even before that movie came out, but they finally announced the casting for the Fantastic Four movie that is coming out in 2025, I want to say. I think it got pushed back because of the like strikes and pandemic and all of that stuff. Yes, it's coming out on July 25th, 2025. It's going to be directed by the director of WandaVision, which is one of my all-time favorite Marvel Studios shows, and that's Matt Shakman that directed that. So, joining the cast. First off, with Reed Richards, I was very highly anticipating who was going to play Reed Richards because I was very fond of John Krasinski in the role, and then he was in Multiverse of Madness after he was rumored to play the role. And then there were so many different names that were thrown out and around after it was confirmed that John Krasinski was just for that movie and he got killed off and we're not recasting him again. Now we finally know that Pedro Pascal will be playing Reed Richards. And I just have to say, I am so excited for this. I'm a huge fan of Pedro Pascal. I mean, he's great in everything that he's in, and so I'm really curious to see how he plays this role. But I'm very happy with this choice. I mean, there were so many people that they could have gone with, but I'm glad that they got somebody that I would actually be excited about. So that's great. And then as Sue Storm, we have Vanessa Kirby. And I wasn't really sure about this choice, to be honest, because she's not an actress that I'm super familiar with. And then I looked her up and discovered that she's been in multiple Mission Impossible movies. And for those that don't know, I'm a huge Mission Impossible fan. I binge watched all of the Mission Impossible movies 2 years ago, I want to say. And I had no recollection of who she was in it. But I have to say, when I binge watched the entire Mission Impossible franchise and fell in love with it, that was like when I had COVID and I was just in the bed. So maybe my brain just was not at full capacity because I was sick. And I haven't, like, despite being a huge fan and saying, like, oh, I love the franchise so much, I haven't rewatched the whole franchise or, like, that many of the movies since then. I've just kind of rewatched, I think, like, the fourth, fifth, and sixth. And I think she's in those, but, like, I still don't remember. But if she was good in that, that's an action movie, so I'm sure it will translate well here. Like, the fact that she was in Mission Impossible tells me she's probably going to be good. Then we have Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. And he's originally from Stranger Things. That's kind of like his biggest thing. And I don't watch Stranger Things, but I am very, 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 very familiar with his role in Stranger Things. He plays like that little like punk rocker guy. I can't even think of his name. I know he got killed off in the show. Spoiler, he got killed off. But I just know that his fans were a little bit interesting, just like the way they were on making the TikTok edits and all of that stuff. And there's like a really funny video of them showing up to like a Comic-Con and they're all wearing like the same outfit of him. But yeah, I mean, he plays like a little young guy. He should be okay. And then lastly, as the Thing, we have Eben Moss Backrack, who is originally, I can't keep saying originally, but like most notably or most recently known from The Bear. And so he actually was like the cousin in The Bear, and so that's a pretty notable role, and he's pretty funny in the show, so I would say, yeah, that's gonna be good. So that's our cast for the Fantastic Four: Pedro Pascal, Vanessa Kirby, Joseph Quinn, and Eben Moss Backrack. Let me know what your thoughts are on this casting. I know there's been like years of speculation, so there's just like so many opinions floating around, but I have to say, like, I'm not mad about it. It should be pretty good. The second thing I want to talk about in the film category, last week on our last episode, we talked about my favorite, pretty much, or just like very popular romance movies. And I know I said in the drama category I'm lacking, but I recommended to you all and also to myself this one movie that was considered a classic. Basically, it's pretty popular and I hadn't seen it, so I told myself on the pod that I would go watch it. And you guys, for Valentine's Day, I finally watched The Notebook. And I have to say, I was pretty average about it. I mean, for one, like I said, I'm not a big drama fan. I was entertained, I'll say that. But at some points, it felt like the movie just kind of dragged on. And I just feel like in general, maybe it was the fact that I think I expected more, because people always say, like, it's such an emotional movie and they all cry, like, while watching The Notebook. And I just kind of, like, didn't. So I was like, I don't know, like, it was a good movie. Yeah, it's not a movie that I would see myself rewatching. And then I was really curious, just like with the whole thing with Noah and Allie. I think I was just kind of waiting for it to be a plot twist, but I just didn't know how they were going to do it, because I knew, like, from the beginning that was Noah and Allie, that Noah was reading the book. They kind of reveal it halfway through the movie, but knowing it from the beginning, I was just kind of like waiting to see, like, is there some other like big emotional thing that's going to happen, because I kind of know this going in already. I have to say, though, if I was in Allie's place, I mean, I can't really say that, but I think I would pick James Marsden's character, because one, he wasn't unattractive, he was attractive, and two, he had money, and three, I mean, Ryan Gosling's character, Noah, he was a little bit like creepy in a way. First of all, how they met. He was hanging off of the Ferris wheel like, I will let go if you don't go on a date with me. Like, that's weird. And then when they break up and Allie moves away, he writes her a letter every single day for a year. Like, that's creepy, you guys. I mean, imagine that in today. Like, imagine somebody, and I know she didn't get the messages, but still, like, the fact that he was that dedicated, like, I would think that I had like a stalker on me. If somebody texted me for every single day for a year despite receiving 0 responses from me, that's just like very weird. And I feel like the only thing that was really keeping them together was like the fact that they met when they were young and they just had like this connection because they had those moments when they were teenagers. But like, No, I would have picked James Marsden. I'm sorry, I would have. That was a better choice. And you know what? He was respectful too. Like, he wasn't a bad boyfriend or a fiance or whatever. It wasn't even like a fight with them when he realized that Allie was still in love with Noah. Like, he was just like, go, follow your heart. Like, he's the personification of if you love them, let them go. And he did it. He was fine. So, yeah. And then the ending was kind of corny. I'm sorry. I think that might have been like the place where people were crying. And it was sad and it was cute. But there's one part where I was like, okay, so the movie should just end right here. It's like 5 minutes before that final scene, like right before he gets sent to the hospital. It was just like, I didn't get why that was added. And like they just die at the same time together. I mean, okay. It was just like very rushed and random almost. Like, I did not like the ending. But yeah, I mean, it was fine. I probably wouldn't rewatch it. Not on my list of favorite Ryan Gosling movies. This Notebook movie and Mean Girls came out the same year. I'd say that Mean Girls is a more entertaining movie for me. If I want to watch a movie with Rachel McAdams in it from 2003, I would pick Mean Girls over The Notebook. But, you know, I'm glad I watched it because I felt like it was a pop culture thing that I was just missing out on because I didn't get it, because I hadn't seen it. And now I get all the references. I get it all. So, yeah, I finally watched The Notebook. Now let me know what other classic movie that I mentioned on last week's episode that I should check out next. The other movie thing I want to talk about is Bob Marley, One Love, which came out last week, and I personally have not seen it yet, but for Valentine's Day, I sent both of my parents out on a little date night, and they went to see the movie. And so, you guys, today on the pod, we have a very special guest. We have my dad here, who's going to share his thoughts on the Bob Marley movie. So, you guys, I have my dad here. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So why don't you tell us just a little bit about your thoughts on the Bob Marley movie?
Well, I thought it was a really good movie. I was glad they finally put something together. The family was really involved in it, so that gave it more authenticity. I thought the actor that played Bob Marley was excellent, and the actress that played his wife Rita, they were the standouts in the whole movie.
That's really great. So for somebody like me that doesn't know a lot about the Bob Marley story, do you think this is like a good movie that shows like a lot of it, or is it like something where we should watch a documentary first to understand a little bit more about his artistry first? What are your thoughts?
Well, the movie itself, it just covers about a 4-year span of his life. So if you want to get the full story about Bob Marley, you'd be better watching the documentary. But the movie shows him as the person that he was, and it gives you a good background on his beliefs and the music. The music is what it's all about, and the music is so great. His messages were so great. He was about peace and love of everybody. And even though he himself was shot, his wife was shot, some other people in his groups were shot, he still wanted to have peace for his country and for mankind. But it's the music, and the music is the star of the whole Bob Marley story, and it's a good intro to his music, and you definitely should go and check out some more of his music.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, and everyone, there you go. If you're interested, the Bob Marley movie is now playing in theaters. Now I'm going to talk about another movie that I have yet to see, but that I mentioned a little bit about on last week's episode of the podcast, and that is Madam Web, which is being absolutely torn apart on the internet right now. Apparently, like I predicted, it's not a good movie. I mean, I'll be the judge of that, if it's really fun or not. But there's so many memes on the internet, people just like consistently making fun of this movie. And so I saved a couple of them to read and react to on the podcast, mainly just this one. And I'm going to tell you all right now, like, if you do not want spoilers for this movie and you plan on watching Madam Web, please just skip ahead because I'm about to like full on spoil the movie. Sorry. But there's one post that's going around on social media. It says, all these events happen in Madam Web except for one. Can you guess which is the lie? So we're going to play that game. This is your last warning to skip ahead because it's spoilers. Okay, so here are all the events that are listed out in the post. First, Madam Web is born in a cave in Peru with the help of magic spider people. 2, the 3 spider women never get powers and are only seen in costumes during dream sequences. Then we have that evil Spider-Man is killed by a large Pepsi sign. Then we have Madam Web becomes wanted for kidnapping by the NYPD. And then we have that Madam Web runs down evil Spider-Man in her car twice. And then we have that Peter Parker is born, but he is not named. And then we have that Madam Web splits into 3 ghost-like copies of herself near the end of the movie. So does anyone have any guesses? I mean, this is a rhetorical question, or you can say it out loud in your room or your car or wherever you're listening to me right now. Which of these is the lie? When I read this, I think the one that I thought was a lie was that evil Spider-Man is killed by a large Pepsi sign because, like, I don't know, 1, it sounds stupid, and then 2, it's like product placement. I don't know. I just thought that one was the lie. But the answer, it's seen in the corner, the very bottom right corner of this post that's going around, and it says, "I'm kidding, they all happen." Every last one of those things happens in the movie. So if you're curious about the chaotic nature of Madam Web, that is Madam Web. And then there's just like a ton of memes going around. I mean, unfortunately, the movie was a box office bomb. And I say unfortunately because you really don't want any creative work that people are putting out to do terribly. I mean, you put a lot of effort into movies. There's so many people, like, it's not just the big star actors and like the directors and the writers that you see. It's all of these different like production staff members and people that put hours and time into this work. So it's really not good to see when a movie doesn't do well or a theater project doesn't do well or a television show. Like, I mean, it applies to everything. But I did giggle a little bit at a couple of these posts. The post originally, it says that Madam Web earned $6 million in its opening day at the domestic box office. The movie had an $80 million budget. Somebody quoted this tweet, you guys, and said, "Bear in mind, we're in the midst of a pandemic." As if like, yeah, that's why nobody came out. We have an excuse here. It's the pandemic. Blame the pandemic for everything. And then somebody else said, "Guys, imagine if you had like $6 million right now. That's like a lot." And they're right. $6 million is a lot of money. I mean, congratulations, $6 million. If somebody walked up to me and was like, "Here's $6 million, I'd count that as a success. So it just changed the context of it. And you know what? Madam Web did not do that bad. I have to say, since I haven't seen the movie yet, that all of these jokes and like people making fun of it, it does not deter me from wanting to see this movie. I would still go pay and see the movie in the theaters. Like, I'm just kind of looking at my schedule to see when I have time. I actually honestly prefer seeing a movie knowing that it will be bad rather than being excited for a movie and then being disappointed. Like, I know I'm just going to go into this movie theater and it's going to be a very unserious movie and I can just like laugh throughout it. So I'm really not concerned. Now, moving on to theater, I have a couple of quick things to talk about in theater. First of all, one thing I'm super excited about is Purlie Victorious, which is the play that ran on Broadway from like September until I think like it just closed in January with Leslie Odom Jr. It's now going to be airing on PBS in May, and so they recorded it. They did a whole pro shot, which I absolutely love pro shots because I think that theaters should be accessible and we should be able to watch theater whenever we can. For people that like can't afford to go see shows or just like aren't near Broadway, I think it's a really nice way to be able to still enjoy the art when they record these shows. Can't wait to see this because I did not get a chance to see Purlie Victorious, the play, on Broadway, even though I heard so many great things about it. And it is a comedy. I actually, last time I was in New York, I bought like the playbook of it, like the script. And so I'm really excited. I'm going to sit down and read it when I have some time. And then I'll get to watch it actually on the stage. So I'm so excited that they actually recorded it. I cannot wait. The next thing that got announced in a very small way is Disney on Broadway has announced that they are developing a Tangled stage production. Now, we can sit here and we can get very excited for this, as I have. I mean, people are already like sharing their fan castings. Everybody wants Derek Klena to be Flynn Rider, apparently. I'm all for it, you know. I would love to see Tangled on Broadway, but I also have to say that this could mean nothing at all because they say this a lot with a lot of different things. And sometimes they are developing a show just so that it can be licensed for schools and like community theater to do it. And then they also have announced productions that were ultimately canceled. So like, since it's so early on, I'm not going to get my hopes up, but I do like that they're stepping in this direction to put Tangled on the stage. Tangled is one of my favorite Disney movies, and Rapunzel is one of my favorite Disney princesses. So I would really love to see this, but we're just going to have to wait and see as more things come out about it. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in the theater world is there's a new off-Broadway production, and I honestly thought it was a joke when I first saw it until I dug around and realized it's a real production. But there's a parody musical of Six the Musical heading to off-Broadway, or actually I think it's open now, and it's called Fave, the Parody Musical. And so basically, while Six is about Henry VIII and his 6 ex-wives, this musical is about former President Donald Trump and 5 ladies that are affiliated with him. So it's a little bit different than Six because it has people that he wasn't married to. The women that make up the 5 in the show are Ivana, Marla, Melania, Stormy, and Ivanka. And so as you can see, it's not just his wives. It's just a little bit of anybody that's been in his circle recently. So I'm curious how that will be. But I have to say, I would go see this just because, one, I'm a super huge fan of Six the Musical. I like what they've done with that show. But with this, I'll understand it because I will know the references because, I know who all of these people are and I know who Trump is. That's very recent. I didn't know anything about Henry VIII and his ex-wives. I know some people learned about it in a history class. I didn't know anything, so I didn't get those references. I will get these references. So yeah, I would go see that. Now, moving on to television. A lot of new information is coming out about the upcoming season 4 of Only Murders in the Building. For those that don't know, I really love this show. I think season 3 was probably the best season so far, so I'm really anticipating season 4, although I'm very mixed about the information that we're getting so far. One thing that's very exciting about this upcoming season is that Meryl Streep will be returning to the show, which I think is a great move because she was such a strong element of season 3 of the show. But I have to say there's additional news that's coming out about this upcoming season of the show that I'm not as excited about, and that is that Only Murders in the Building is now moving from New York to Los Angeles. And obviously we don't have a lot of plot details. I'm hoping this is maybe more of, I had to refresh my memory a little bit because I forgot how it ended, but I think that it ended with Jane Lynch, whose character is constantly kind of dressed up as Steve Martin, it's a constant joke that she looks like Steve Martin's character, is murdered. And so I think they were trying to get Steve Martin's character though. And so maybe they're going to LA for clues since it's actors. But I don't want the whole season to take place in Los Angeles is what I'm getting at. I don't know where they're going with it, but I think that the whole show has been built around the Arconia. It's been built around the New York City scenery. And I'm just not very excited about the idea of them taking all of that and moving to Los Angeles. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of Disney Channel shows when they're in their final season and they switch and do something new. Or halfway through, Jonas to Jonas LA, Hannah Montana to Hannah Montana Forever. That's what it's giving. I don't want them to switch everything to Los Angeles. New York and LA are 2 completely different vibes of a city. So come on, you guys. Let's stay in New York. I like New York better anyways. I saw this joke going around, although since Jane Lynch's character did get killed in New York, I don't think it's the same. But they were now it's no longer going to be only murders in the building. It's only murders in a building because they're moving. But I don't think they're going to move. I think it's just maybe a few episodes. I don't know. I have to look into it. But I really don't know about moving to Los Angeles. I'm going to still watch. And it's probably still going to be a fun time because it's such a great show. It's well written. I always appreciate that the mysteries are something that is easy to figure out. It's not like it's coming out of the left field and it's like a very random twist at the end. I love that you can follow the show. And so it'll still be a fun ride. And I'll keep an open mind about moving to LA. But I wish they would just stay in New York. But we'll see. We'll see how they do it. To end on a positive note, though, another exciting thing about this new season is that Molly Shannon will be joining the cast, and she's going to be playing an LA businesswoman. So at least we get something really exciting about them partially going to LA for the season. I love Molly Shannon. She's just a really great comedic actress, so I can't wait to see what she adds to the show. Really quickly, I just also want to shout out 2 other TV things that are happening right now. Last week, since we last spoke, Jon Stewart returned to The Daily Show, and he previously hosted this show from 1999 until 2015. So it's really huge that he's back, and with the uncertainty of a permanent host since Trevor Noah exited the show, he is back and filling in. I think he's just there every Monday night, but it's really just so cool to see him back. And then the other thing is that American Idol returned for season 22 on Sunday. What's already notable about this season, though, is that it has been announced that this will be Katy Perry's final season with the show. She's been on since 2018, so it's kind of sad to see her go, especially since a lot of the clips that I've seen on social media from the show, they're of her judging, and she seems like a lot of fun. I also do plan on trying to keep up with this season. I just really enjoy weekly shows, and lately I've been into reality shows. But like weekly shows just give me something to look forward to, having like a TV schedule. So on Sundays, I watch American Idol. On Mondays, I watch The Bachelor. Wednesdays, I know I have Abbott Elementary. I don't know, it's just nice. Nothing will beat Succession Barry or White Lotus Sundays on HBO though, I fear. But it's still fun to kind of have that schedule to look forward to. Now, moving on to the music industry, we have some really fun new music releases that I want to talk about, specifically 2. First, Ariana Grande released yet another collab with Mariah Carey. I just love it whenever they collaborate because, early on in Ariana's career, she was compared a lot to Mariah. They just both have these perfect, amazing, high vocals, and they collaborated for the remix of Ariana Grande's previously released single, Yes and I have to say, this is a song that is not one of my favorite Ariana songs. It's really taken some time to grow on me, but with the Mariah remix, it's been like on repeat. I love it so much. And then I also have to shout out Training Season by Dua Lipa. And this is the song that she performed when she opened up the Grammys a couple of weeks ago. And I remember when she performed it because I used to be a huge, super fan of Dua Lipa before her second album came out. And I liked the second album a lot, but I was a huge fan going from the self-titled album, going into Future Nostalgia. And then after that, I didn't follow her as much, just listening to the music. And so I wasn't up to date really on the release schedule. So when she performed at the Grammys, I was a little bit confused. I was like, is this song even out? I haven't heard this one yet. So when I saw this was out, I was like, oh, now it's out. Now I see. But I really love this song. I think it's a lot of fun. I might love it a little inch more than Houdini. And the music video is so much fun too. So those are my 2 picks of the week. Go listen to them. They're pretty big already because, they're 2 of the biggest pop girls out there right now, Ariana Grande and Dua Lipa. Who isn't listening to them? But I'm still going to tell you too because I loved both of those. Now in our wild card section, we have 2 things to talk about. First of all, I talked about this on the first episode of the season, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, the new re-theme for Splash Mountain at Disney World and Disneyland, all about Princess and the Frog, Princess Tiana. They have finally announced that for Disney World, at least, it will be opening this summer. And I have to say, I only care about Disney World because I'm going to Disney World at the end of the year. And I was wondering, is it going to be open in time for my trip? And it is because I'm going in October and that's the fall. So if it's opening in the summer, then that means I get to go. And I'm saying this as if I'm going to get on Splash Mountain or Tiana's Bayou Adventure, But I never got on it because the drop is so big and scary. And I thought that they didn't have restraints, but apparently they do have a seatbelt, lap bar thing. I don't know why I thought they didn't have restraints. I was just genuinely believing that everybody was just on there praying they wouldn't fly off or something because I was so uncomfortable with that drop. On Pirates, there's no lap bar. You just go down the drop. But anyways, I was not feeling that big of a drop and I never got on it. So maybe in October I will get on it. The second thing I want to talk about is the Met Gala, because they have announced that Zendaya, Chris Hemsworth, Jennifer Lopez, and Bad Bunny, they will be this year's co-chairs for the event. Now remember, this theme is the Garden of Time, and I have to say, out of all four of these, I think I'm most excited for Zendaya and Bad Bunny, but the most excited for Zendaya because, you guys, Zendaya always kills her Met Gala looks. The Cinderella look where she had like the transforming dress, that was history, you guys. That was history. And even now, like, she always has like the best stylist. Did you guys see her at the Dune 2 premiere in London? That like robotic look? Amazing. So I just know that she's going to crush her look at the Met Gala this year. I cannot wait to see it. So typically in the pop recap, I do like to do a little bit of what I've been up to. And I could do like a general life update. I don't know. I feel like most podcasters, no matter what their topic is, they just kind of share like little stories from their lives. Like, yeah, we're a sports podcast, but here's a silly little story about a wedding I went to over the weekend. I don't do that. I could do that, but I don't. I usually reserve that section of the podcast for the pop culture experiences that I have. And this week I didn't really have anything. Although last week I talked about those Disney Princess American Girl dolls. And over the weekend I got the Ariel one and she's so cute. I am so excited about it. It's my first American doll that I've bought for myself in like so many years. And I don't care that I'm 23 and I play with dolls. Like, it's a really cute thing to have in your collection, to have in your room. Like, there's no shame in it. I really am so excited to have the Ariel American Girl doll. But going back to what I was saying, one of the things that I want to talk about is almost what was for this weekend. This is going to be like 50% what I've been up to and 50% of a fandom corner. This is a rant for the fangirls who are a fan of someone and forget they are actually very famous. Or like you've been following them since the beginning of their careers and now they're way more popular and you just didn't catch it. This is so silly, but I have to do it. Because who knows who Marcelo Hernandez is? Apparently a lot of y'all. But for those that don't know, he's a comedian. He's on Saturday Night Live. So like I said, this is very silly. I think he was always famous. He's on a national television show. He's on SNL. But I have to say, I must have missed this new wave or like this new craze around him. But he just did 5 shows here in Washington, D.C., and I didn't get into a single one of them because they were all sold out. And I was aware of the shows, like, from the very first day that he announced them. And so I just thought it was so funny. I was like, no way did he sell out all of these shows. I had no clue. When you're, like, talking with your friends and, like, they don't know who you're talking about, I just think that that person isn't that famous. But I guess that's just like the circles that I'm in. I just don't see people talking about him because I then went on his Instagram and saw that he literally has like 1 million followers. I didn't realize this. But me missing these shows was especially upsetting to me. I'm going to have a story that I'm going to tell. Actually, let's start from the beginning. I became a fan of Marcelo not even until like December 2022 when I attended my very first taping for SNL, which was the Keke Palmer SZA episode. I was watching SNL that season, but he was brand new and new cast members aren't typically in a lot. I'd say that was the case for Marcelo too, but at the episode I went to, he was in a Weekend Update segment that did not make it to air. That was happening a lot, unfortunately. I'd be so happy whenever I got to like see him do Update because he's like a really good stand-up and I love watching his stand-up videos. And I was in the audience for his Short Kings one. That one is probably one of my favorite Update sketches that he's done. So if you want to find a new comedian to watch, start with that because that's like one of my favorites. After the first show, I saw him and I was like, yeah, he's hilarious. I honestly like all 4 of the new cast members from that season on the show, which were Devin Walker, Michael Longfellow, Molly Carney. But I was also at the Michael B. Jordan episode, and I feel like that was one of the first episodes that he really kind of blew up on because he had a lot of really good sketches in that one. And then also like the Pedro Pascal episode from season 48, and then the Bad Bunny episode from this season. But anyways, the story that I was going to tell really quickly is that me and my friend, shout out Gabby, we went to SNL together and then she became a fan of Marcelo too. And we saw that he was playing the Comedy Cellar in New York. So we like planned to go. It was like late at night, like 11:30 at night. And we went. And then I guess like something happened with the lineup. Honestly, we should have recognized, because I realized that it was the same week as like a SNL taping, and SNL schedules are like really crazy. So I think he just didn't make it, but he didn't go. And so like they change like the Comedy Cellar schedules all the time. It's just like they'll list who's going to be there or who's supposed to be there, but they give that warning of like lineups subject to change. So yeah, me and my friend, we paid like $15 for a ticket into the Comedy Cellar, and then they make you pay like $5 for a drink and $5 for fries. I think we just got like Sprite and fries because that was the cheapest thing. And then we just saw everyone but Marcelo. It was still a fun night, but like I've wanted to see Marcelo do stand-up for so long. And this was like last April. And so after that failed attempt, I was like, if we go, we're not going to go to the Comedy Cellar because the Comedy Cellar makes you pay all this extra stuff. But we never got around to seeing him do stand-up again. So then I saw that he was coming to DC, now that I'm in DC. And I was like, okay, like he dropped the tickets in like November. And the show was this weekend, so it was February, and I didn't want to buy tickets like that far in advance because I'll be busy, and then I'll have bought tickets and then not be able to make it. And you guys, I really wish I did, because I had no clue that he was like super famous, like that people would go to all of these shows. I mean, he's doing 5 shows, and they all sold out. I mean, that's incredible. But I think that he's a really good stand-up, and I think that a lot of people know that now. And so I would always recommend, like, if he does go tour near you, you should definitely go because he is hilarious. But it was so funny to me. I even, like, somebody tried to scam me for Marcelo tickets when I was looking for a resale. And I was like, really? We're there now? Like, he's that famous where people are scamming to get tickets? I was like, this is unbelievable. So, yeah, I did not make the DC shows, any of them. But the saga will continue. Eventually, I will see Marcelo Hernandez do a stand-up set live and in person. I'm also feeling like since he is a lot more popular now, he's probably going to get like stand-up specials on like a streaming service. So then I would get a whole stand-up to see, just like to see, because he only has his SNL stuff and then like little 5-minute clips on YouTube. And I want to see a full set because he's really funny. He's one of my favorite comedians. But yeah. That's just like a little rant for, like I said, the girls who know of somebody like a favorite music artist and then you procrastinate on tickets. Like, I feel like we've all been there. I've been there for other people before too, where I procrastinate and I'm like, nobody's buying these out. That happened with Tate McRae, actually, now that I think about it. I was like, oh, her show didn't sell out when it went on sale. And then she dropped her album, her current album. Those tickets are sold out and the resale is starting at $200. So I'll figure out that later. I'm not paying $200, but I gotta be at that tour. But you know what I mean? Like, I didn't know people listen to Tate McRae like that. So it's just so silly when that happens. But yeah, that's my little rant on that situation, on what almost was what I've been up to for this weekend. I just want to end this though by saying, if you got tickets and saw Marcelo Hernandez in DC, congratulations, you lucky one. I'm totally not jealous of you. Also, to Marcelo Hernandez, who is totally not out there listening, but I'm going to say it as if you are. 1, hi, I'd love to have you on the pod. And 2, please come back to DC, maybe sometime in the summer, and let's do a venue that's bigger than that tiny little comedy club because you are super famous and you will sell it out. Okay, this is like my 3rd unsuccessful time at seeing Marcelo do stand-up, but one day I will see him do stand-up and it will be awesome. The second thing that I've been seeing cause a little discourse on the internet, a little more than usual lately, is Broadway stunt casting. And I get it because right now, literally within like the last 2 weeks, we've had quite a few new additions to Broadway. We have Ariana Madix joining Chicago. And to be honest, I don't even know if I should include Chicago in this situation because they've been running on stunt casting for years. They aren't really one of the shows being discussed online with this right now because it's not new for them. But we also have 2 stars from 2 pretty popular teen streaming shows that both recently had their Broadway debuts. And that's Joe Locke from the Netflix show Heartstopper, who is in Sweeney Todd currently. And then we have Lola Tung from the Amazon Prime show The Summer I Turned Pretty, who is now in Hadestown, and she's Eurydice, the lead over there. Then we also have Boy George, who is playing Harold Ziedler in Moulin Rouge. And also somehow Aaron Tveit and Sutton Foster have been thrown around in these conversations as well, because they just replaced Josh Groban and NLA Ashford as the two leads in Sweeney Todd. And I have to just add them in because they are key to the two main trending points that I want to discuss. So first of all, there's a difference between stunt casting and star casting that I think a lot of people are blurring. Stunt casting is Lola Tung. Stunt casting is Joe Locke. Their casting is an attempt to get new audiences in the theaters because they have sizable fan bases. And yeah, those fan bases have been showing up. Like, I saw people on Broadway Twitter got mad because a Joe Locke fan said this, and I think they were really just mad because a Joe Locke fan account said it, even though it was true. But Joe Locke joined Sweeney Todd in between Josh and Annalay leaving, but before Aaron Tveit and Sutton Foster's arrival. So it was like a week or two of alternates playing the leads in the show, which we love alternates on Broadway. They hold it down. It's awesome. But the tweet was like, it's so crazy. This whole week of Sweeney Todd is sold out on an alternate week just as Joe Locke joins. And then the Broadway fans went crazy. They were all like, oh, why are you saying that about alternates? They're just as good. It wasn't because of Joe. But like, correct me if I'm wrong. But Sweeney Todd, they had a rush ticketing policy, but it was only active when the stars, Josh Groban or Annalay Ashford, were out, because those shows didn't sell as well. Because there were a lot of tourists who were coming in specifically to see Josh Groban or Annalay Ashford. So the show would initiate a rush policy to sell more tickets at a discounted rate because the stars were out and there weren't as many people coming. And it's proof that like this stunt cast worked, that during that week that Joe Locke arrived, it sold out. But I digress. Joe Locke is a stunt cast. Aaron Tveit and Sutton Foster, those are star cast. They are Broadway stars. We know them primarily from Broadway as big theater names. And unlike stunt cast, where it's like, when I saw that Lola Tung was cast, I immediately got worried because I had no clue she could sing. She's not known for singing or for being a Broadway talent. She was cast likely because of her popular work on her television show. And then it just so happened that she can sing beautifully. And that kind of leads me into the second point that I wanted to hit with this topic, and it's that, please, if we're going to do stunt casts, please let them be good. Joe Locke and Lola Tung are stunt casts that work so well because they have Broadway caliber talent. They sound great, they're performers, they just didn't necessarily become famous for those things, but they're great. There's nothing worse though than a stunt cast where it's like the person's first time on a stage, singing for the first time, all of that. I don't know why, but the first thing that comes to mind is Cameron Dallas in Mean Girls. Cameron Dallas was a Viner from MadCon. He had no singing background. He's never sung like before or anything like that. They just threw him in the show. And that's kind of like where my problem comes into play. I mean, I just think with stunt casting and star casting really too, it should still be a priority to place someone in a show where they fit and will be good. Like, I don't want to sit in a Broadway show and go like, oh, that's a terrible stunt cast just to sell tickets. I want to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know this person was so talented out of their Netflix show or like their YouTube videos or whatever they're from. I think they should be people who, if not famous for their show, could have sustained a Broadway career had they had picked that path first. You know what I mean? Like someone who maybe was a theater major in college, but then graduated and only acted in movies, but they still have that caliber. It's like the question is, would you cast them in this role, in this show, if it weren't for their following? And if the answer is no, then I think it's likely not a good stunt cast. The last thing I want to mention about stunts and star casting is just fan etiquette, which, as a pop culture podcast with an emphasis on the fan experience, I feel that I need to and likely will do a full episode talking about this at some point, specifically on stage dooring. But first, I just want to say, stop sitting in the front row and video recording the Broadway show like it's a concert. Because first of all, it's illegal. And second of all, if you're going to do it, why do it in the literal front row? Like, I've seen actors come out and post recently, like, we see you. You think you're being sneaky, but we see you. And I can only imagine how distracting it is, or even like how harmful it could be. Because, like, there's a video going around on TikTok right now of Lola Tongue doing her Wait For Me reprise for the very first time. And people are, like, fully judging it. And I'm like, it's her first time, her little Broadway debut. And that's, like, plastered on the internet for people to judge and say whatever. And it isn't even bad. Like, she didn't even sound bad, and people are judging her off of her first show. But I don't know. I'd just be annoyed as a performer if that happened to me. Like, we should be working to make Broadway more accessible, yes, but not that way. That is not the way to do it. The second theater etiquette thing is stage dooring, and like I said, I'm not going to go into it because I'm going to go into it later, but I just want to complain under the topic of star and stunt casting while we're talking about it, that stage dooring for a show that has star or stunt casting is a literal nightmare. And a lot of the people on the Broadway subreddit will say, like, oh, stage dooring sucks. They basically hate on it and say it's weird or whatever, and that shows should get rid of it, which I completely disagree with because 99% of my stage door experiences have been fine. It's just that the 1% that are not fine are really not fine. And I'm just going to shout out or pinpoint two specific ones where I just had bad crowd experiences at the stage door. The first is Miles Frost at MJ. That was a nightmare stage door. The second one, Aaron Tveit in Moulin Rouge, that was even worse. People were literally jumping on top of cars, pushing, acting crazy, and I'm so sorry to Aaron Tveit because you're great, but like, I just don't get it. I do not get the hype to do that over anyone. You can never catch me acting like that over anyone. The latest stage door discourse, it comes from a stunt cast over at Sweeney Todd, which has been notably one of the worst Broadway stage doors since the opening of the show last year. A fan recently said, I'm saying this with air quotations, by the way, fan, took to Instagram to complain to Joe Locke about him not doing stage door on the day of the show. They just left a really rude, nasty message on his page, and unfortunately, he saw it. And he responded, and he even gave an explanation, basically saying, like, this show is very tolling, and he needed a break. He does stage door sometimes, but that day he just didn't feel up to it. And, like, that's totally fine. Like, I don't get why people or, like, how people could feel so rude and so entitled about it. And so I just have to say, don't do that. Don't be that person. Don't act crazy at the stage door, and do not go complaining about it or yelling at, like, a specific artist or actor because they didn't stage door a specific day. At the end of the day, you went to the show to see the show, and stage door is something extra. But, like, that's just going to be my abbreviated rant on stage dooring because, like I said, could talk about it for a while. I want to go into, like, the history of it because it has been around for a while, and there's always constantly discourse about it, so we'll probably talk about it again later. The last thing, though, that I want to talk about that's been causing discourse on the internet is Beyonce's country music not being country enough to country fans and country radio and all of that. I just want to know why, because it is actually very country influenced. And I know that country radio has accepted it now. There was just like some controversy on Twitter because a Beyonce fan tweeted that they had requested it on a radio station in Oklahoma, and the station told them that they don't play Beyonce music. To my understanding, that station has since added Texas Hold'em into rotation, but I think there's still a bit of pushback from the country music community, and I just think it sucks. Like, first of all, artists change genres all the time. Country artists go pop and vice versa or whatever. And then on top of that, Beyonce is literally from the South, from Texas, and she is not new to the country music space. I mean, she's performed at the Country Music Association Awards with the Chicks back in 2016, and she performed a country influence performance with Sugarland, who I have to say I'm a huge fan of Sugarland. But anyways, she performed with them back at the 2007 American Music Awards. Both of these two new Beyonce songs, they do feel like country songs. You can hear the influence, and it's in a way that feels real. Like, I get having an issue with Lil Nas X doing Old Town Road, which was essentially a mockery of country music stereotypes, but these new Beyonce songs, they are not that. They are real. As someone who grew up a fan of country music, I'm really excited to see what Beyonce does in this space, and I can only hope that there isn't a continuous discourse alongside her releases, especially not one that's rooted in racism, since a lot of Black country artists have come out and talked about how it is harder for them to succeed in that industry, and that sucks too because if you look at the history, country music is very rooted in Black culture. I think Beyonce is experimenting with different sounds, though, and just having fun with it. And I think that's what music should be. It should be open for exploration. So I hope that she continues to do it. That's all for this week's pop recap. Now let's get into the topic for today. So as I mentioned earlier, today we are starting the brand new series, Full-Time Fan. I think I have somewhat of an interesting or unique experience in the industry where I had the privilege of kind of growing up in the media industry. So my experience of being a fan on the internet, it really just enhanced my passion. It didn't really spark it. My mom is actually a radio host, so I pretty much grew up in the studio. I've been following her around to concerts, award shows, and other events since I was like a toddler, and I think the experiences that I've had have really made me passionate about the idea of working in the entertainment and media industry. And I think I initially wanted to be a broadcast journalist. Like my dream was to be an anchor on Good Morning America or The Today Show or something like that. And I would actually wake up every single morning to watch one or the other when I was in middle school. And fun fact, I actually got to be on The Today Show a couple of times when I was in college for a couple of segments. So it's kind of a full circle moment there too. But yeah, that was my dream. And then I also, being a child of the internet, when I reached my preteen phase and entered the world of Twitter, I got this new passion for the music industry and like live tweeting award shows and concerts and touring. And one of the things that always stuck out to me was like how these different things could bring people together, like how pop culture could create community online. I don't know why the first thing that came to my mind just now was Pretty Little Liars on Tuesdays, where everyone would come together and live tweet, and it would be like the #1 trending topic. And everybody on my timeline would be talking about it. It was like a little community in and of itself. But from that point on, I had this new passion for working in social media or digital marketing for a record label or a television show. And I was specifically passionate about creating like those big activations that would have huge fan engagement. Like think of the Harry Styles Eroda rollout for his Adore You music video. I wanted to make stuff like that would have people like digging around on the internet, like really creative stuff. So anyways, my first role that I wouldn't call an internship or a job, it was really just like a volunteer position. It was in high school and I was a digital ambassador for Island Records. And back then I was a super fan for Shawn Mendes. So I thought it was the coolest thing ever to be like on a team to help promote his music. It was like, I do that all the time anyways. This is fun. This is easy. And I felt like I was a part of something special. From there, I just kept going. But I just want to say, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that fans are so important. Fans really run the industry. I mean, so do people with money. But if the fans don't enjoy what you're putting out, if they aren't interested, who are you selling to? And a lot of the time it's so helpful if there is a fan on the team who knows how stuff is being received, someone who knows what the audience wants so that you can cater to them. And fans just bring that extra sense of passion. So yeah, I'm just like very excited to start talking about this whole idea of fans turn professionals. So let's just go ahead and get started. I do have a little surprise for y'all though. I'm not just going to be talking about my career experiences to you all. We're going to make it a little bit fun. My mother, who I mentioned earlier, is a media personality herself, is joining us today. She's going to be interviewing me. So let's get into it. Okay, everyone, so please welcome my mother to the pod. Her name is Tracy. Why don't you introduce yourself, Ma?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. I am Tracy, Katrina's mom. I'm a syndicated radio personality. I also work in television, and I am here to ask her a few questions, so this should be fun.
Awesome. Now, when I was asking you if you were interested in interviewing me for the start of this brand new series for the podcast, we were just kind of discussing this general idea of full-time fan, and you sort of mentioned that you had people growing up in the industry yourself that you admired and that you were a fan of. Could you talk just briefly about that and how you kind of progressed into your career while having those role models and people that you looked up to?
Yes, Katrina. Coming up, actually, I knew that this is what I wanted to do when I was just 13 years old. It was a dream of mine, and my dream came true. And so I had some really good people that I looked up to in the industry. I initially wanted to start in television, and I did before I rolled over into radio. And I had some very incredible I would say mentors. We didn't talk every single day or anything like that, but I did all of my school reports on my favorite reporters, and I hung out with them at the studio. And, I just began to actually at one point wanted to be just like them, but I knew that I had to develop my own personality to be successful in the industry. So I had some incredible people to look up to.
That's really awesome. Okay, now it's time for you to interview me.
Okay, well, this should be fun. Can you tell us about your earliest memories of being a fan of music and how that passion influenced your career path?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was introducing this kind of series, I talked about how, well, for one, growing up under you in the media industry and being around so many different things in music, it really just made me passionate about the music industry through the media side. And I kind of grew up wanting to be just like you. And I actually went to like my first concerts. I found the tickets the other day when I was like 1 year old. We went to see the Wiggles.
Right.
And so I've kind of been in that space for so long. And then like getting on social media, I always just became very passionate, not even just social media, but like at concerts in person, how music brings people together. And I just wanted to be a part of that in any way I really could. And that kind of expanded, I know, like just in general in the entertainment industry. And so I just knew that like if I'm passionate about something, I want to work in that thing that I'm passionate about so it doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah. What were some pivotal moments that you can share or experiences during your time at NYU that shaped your transition from music to television?
Right. So I ultimately did end up switching from wanting to work in the music industry into the television industry. I went to NYU, as you know, and I felt like at first I really wanted to work on the music marketing side because that was kind of like the pipeline that I was following. Like in high school, as I mentioned, I did the Island Records thing. And then coming to NYU, I wanted to work for like a record label and music marketing or something like that. And I did a couple of internships for NYU, like properties, a professor, and also like the NYU Stern School of Business. But then I did a publicity internship with a music company, and they were like the company that oversaw public relations for a variety of pretty massive music artists, including Dua Lipa and Zayn. And so I really had a really great experience working for that firm as an intern, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then this was actually during the pandemic, but I have to say that the pandemic did happen. And during that time, I found myself kind of like shifting into enjoying other things, not just music, because being at home all the time, I was really watching like a lot more movies and a lot more television. And so my interest in that started to spark a lot more. And it just so happened that at that same time, I had taken on another job with a music company, and I just didn't have as good of an experience with that role. And so it kind of started that shift for me out of the music industry. And it wasn't something that I found to be permanent. And even to this day, I'd still say I'd move back into the music industry. But at that time, all of those things were kind of happening for me at the same time. And I was just becoming more and more passionate about television and like even like being in fan communities, like that made me more interested. It's so silly, but those like first 3 Marvel shows that came out, WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, especially WandaVision. I know we shouldn't create like content just to appeal to fans, but I just felt like for some reason I kept thinking about these shows and how they were just like a light for so many people in the dark times of the pandemic. And I just constantly thought about how I want to work on projects and shows that get people like this riled up, things that make people happy, things that make people think. And I mean, critically is one thing, but then also just like mysteries, pulling apart all of these different things that happen in shows and movies and just getting people, keeping them entertained, I guess. And in the music industry, you can do that too, but during the pandemic, like I said, there wasn't as much movement in the music industry, especially with like concerts and tourings coming to an end. But we still had those TV shows and movies that had already been filmed coming out, and we could still like really enjoy that. And so I'd say that was like the pivotal moment when I started to shift over. And at NYU, while I was there, I got to intern. I got my first internship with the late night publicity team at NBC. That was my first like television industry internship. And I had such an amazing time in that role, and I just kept going from there.
That's wonderful, Katrina. And sitting here, just listening to you talk about it, I was there, just watching you over the years develop your passion for wanting to do television and wanting to be in this industry. And it brings me to the point of thinking how when you're passionate about something, when you're passionate about anything and you begin to dream about it, it kind of reminds me of myself. I can see myself in you. But the amazing thing is, I didn't push you into this industry. It was something that you desired and something you wanted to do. But that exposure was very, very important. So I can look back over the years, for example, when you were just a little girl, never being shy to be on stage or anything like that. I believe your first concert, I took you out, I was hosting an event and you wanted to MC. And I'm thinking, I didn't want to say no to you. So I said, okay, I'll try to find a way to bring you on stage where I won't get in trouble and people will receive you and they won't look at me like, oh, you're pushing your daughter on stage. But if I remember correctly, you were just a little girl, maybe around 3 years old. And we were at the University of Maryland. And they had asked me to come out and host an event. And you went up. You weren't afraid. You grabbed the microphone and you talked to the people with your little cute little voice. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, is she really wanting to follow in this path? And you've done it. You've done it and you've done it well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really interesting story, especially since I don't have like a massive like memory of that happening. And yet like just hearing that that's something that I did, it just kind of adds up because I was talking about a little bit earlier how at first I kind of wanted to work in like a broadcast journalism career, kind of being an anchor and things like that. And now that I'm not like working in front of the camera for my job, I'm doing this podcast, still talking about all of the things that I love. And so it's just really been a great way to constantly be fueled by my passions and to also have people around me that motivate me to do that.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned earlier about interning for major companies like NBC and working on The Tonight Show, which was incredible, outstanding, a proud moment for your parents. Can you share a little more about your experiences? Because, you know, interns are very, very important. And we've seen the benefits of you interning and where you are now from your internships.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about my journey because I know a lot of people commonly ask me, like, how did you get your internship at NBC? And just like asking for tips along the way and kind of like going back to like this theme of this like podcast episode, like full-time fan and like growing up wanting something or being a fan of something and being really passionate about something and then turning that into a professional career for yourself. That's kind of something that happened with me and like NBC and all of their shows because for the longest time, I dreamed of working there. I always wanted to work there. And I remember when I moved to New York City for college, that very first week of like orientation and welcome programs, before I even sat down in my first class at NYU, I had already attended my very first Today Show concert series, and I had already attended my very first taping of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Like that was like my number one priority when I moved into college and I got there. I immediately was like, okay, I want to see these shows, these New York City things that I always dreamed about being able to go to. I like knocked them out in my first week. And then like I loved being in that studio space so much that even though it was just like as a fan, I continued to try to go back whenever I could. So like in my first semester, I had already practically gone to tapings of every single late night show in New York City. I mean, I saw Jimmy Fallon, I saw Seth Meyers, I saw Stephen Colbert. I even saw Jimmy Kimmel during his 1 week that he came to Brooklyn. I like lived, eat, breathe, all of that stuff. And so it was like the place that I knew I always wanted to be. And so then when I got the opportunity, I mean, I think I had been applying to NBC like every single semester, but I don't really think that like as a freshman or a sophomore without any real internship opportunities, like I didn't really have the chance. But when I got like some more internships under my belt, I finally got like some interviews. And I remember like the first team that I interviewed with, I don't think I like got that one. But one of the things that I remember being so like thankful for with the NBC like recruiting team is that when I didn't get one internship, they'd come back to me and say, hey, you didn't really match well with this team, but we're going to place you with another team for another opportunity. So it wasn't like the end of the road. Their recruitment team always made it so that like they saw talent in you and were going to find a place for you rather than just like throwing you somewhere, and if you didn't make it, that was it, you're rejected. And so I know when I interviewed for the late night publicity team, that was not like the first and only interview I had done for the NBC. And so I finally got that one, and I just remember like jumping up and down for joy because there's so many different things. You can't really choose what team you get when you apply to an NBC internship. You like apply to departments, so like a marketing internship or like a publicity internship or whatever you want to do. And so the fact that I had gotten placed on the team that like since freshman year I had been dreaming of working on, since freshman year I had been going to tapings of these shows, I got placed on the publicity team for The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, for Late Night with Seth Meyers, for Saturday Night Live, for all of the different specials like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and the 4th of July fireworks. I literally got like placed on the best team that I possibly could have, the team that like perfectly fit my goals. And I just remember feeling so lucky for that. And honestly, that internship was one of the best experiences I could have had. I learned so much in that role. I even got asked to extend. So I was a summer intern, but I extended all the way through till December. And it was just so great to kind of like learn so much in that space. And there's just so many different like really important lessons that I learned. Just one of the biggest things is like connections is so important. I think it was really difficult for me because I was a remote intern. But being able to stay in touch with like your supervisors is extremely, extremely important because things can go a long way. And I have to say that I think that's part of the reason why I was able to kind of really keep going with NBC Universal. Because when it was time for me to kind of like wrap up my time with the late night publicity team, I started applying for more internships. And I placed for interviews with both, I think, Late Night with Seth Meyers for like a production internship, and then The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon for a social media internship. And I remember completing both of those interviews. And one thing I have to say about like these interviews, one thing that's really helpful is if you really are a fan of these shows, because only a fan can passionately like talk about these shows and the ways that they like probe you for answers in these interviews. I remember one internship interview, I think it was the Today Show. They asked me to name all of their anchors. And it's like, you have to be able to know that stuff. And so it's like, you just want to be able to know like all of the important information. And then one thing that I noticed when I did the interviews for the Late Night with Seth Meyers and the Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, it was like, these are all late night shows on the same network. But why do you want to intern for Jimmy Fallon over Seth Meyers? And they ask you that. So you just have to know, like, what's the difference between these shows? And I know, like, Jimmy Fallon, he leans more entertainment while Seth Meyers leans more political. Those are just, like, the things that you kind of have to pick up on and know. And so I think that me watching those shows, me being a fan of those shows, really helped me. And then going back to those connections, like, you never know who knows somebody else. So, like, NBC, they have a page program, and who would be my supervisor after I got accepted into the Tonight Show internship program, she did my interview. She was in the page program with my supervisor from my late night publicity internship. And so I was able to have, like, a little bit of a boost because they knew each other, and because I did so well, as I believed, like, as I was told, in my late night publicity internship, they put in also like a good recommendation because she was like, we talked about you. She said she was great. And so it's like those kind of things also just like push you further. You have to like really make sure that you're connecting with people and just like staying in touch. And I had such a great time in the Tonight Show internship as well. Social media for the Tonight Show was just like a lot of fun because there's so many different tasks that you get to do. You know, you get to make like graphics, you get to do like the GIFs for the social media, like on Twitter and stuff. You get to like watch the show and then come up with like, what do you think are going to be like the most buzzworthy things to kind of clip and create? And you do all of that yourself. And then to be able to see your work actually get published on like the social media pages of the Tonight Show, it was like the coolest thing ever. And then I had such a fun time that I ended up extending that internship through until September of that year. So I was a Tonight Show intern from January to September. And I felt really lucky for that opportunity as well. I was a research intern during that time. And then I also helped to kind of like oversee some of the other internship tasks. Like I got to plan a lot of like conversations where like we'd have different people from the Tonight Show team, like the writers, and they would all come and talk to the rest of the interns, or like the production assistants would all come and talk. And I used to be able to help kind of plan and pull those together. And so I kind of like really picked up a lot of really cool skills in those roles. And I just learned so much. It was just like the dream opportunity of a lifetime.
Yes. And how did you take your experience through those internships to help you to get to a place of where you are now? Because you were fortunate, you were blessed to actually get your first job in television while you were still a senior. So you had this job in TV waiting on you like from January, February until you graduated in May. How did those internships help you out to land such a major job?
Yeah, I remember that being like such a great thing because I did decide to take like a break my senior year from interning since I interned every single semester from like the fall of my sophomore year, including summers. And so I really loved being able to take that break. And then I got a job offer in January. So like my entire second semester, I didn't have to worry about anything. And that was really, really great. And I have to say, like, one thing, I learned so many important things, I think, in those roles. And one of the things that I always take with me is we had like different mentors that we got placed with at the Tonight Show. And one thing that always stuck with me is one of my mentors, he told me that your knowledge for like different topics, especially in entertainment for me, it should spread miles wide and an inch deep. So you should know like at least a little bit about everything to be able to talk about it and have a starting point rather than like not know like who somebody is or what something is and like just know like a little small thing. So like for example with pop culture, know a little bit about film, television, theater, music, all of that, not just like know just music and a whole lot of it. Know a little bit about a lot of different things. And then I also just like gained a lot of leadership skills in those roles, a lot of organization. And in all of the roles, like one of the things that was really great about the internships that I did is I never did the same thing in each internship. So I was like constantly picking up different skills. And I also think that doing that, it helped me like really like narrow down what specifically I wanted to do. Like, oh, well, did I like social media work more than I like publicity work? And did I like research more than I like publicity? And being able to try out different things is something I would always encourage. Like I wouldn't just do like one thing your entire time. If you do like a digital marketing internship, try like regular marketing. Or if you did like marketing, then try like publicity. You can stay in like the same like range. And that's one of the best things about being in college is the fact that you can explore and try out different things. Right. And so that's another like big takeaway that I think. And then of course, like I said, staying connected, not just with the people that you're working for, like your supervisors, but the people that you are working with. Because I know a lot of the people that I intern with, they're all doing it big in entertainment too. So you just want to make sure that you're staying connected and just like really expanding your network and also expanding your skills at the same time.
That's great. Good advice. And speaking of advice, what advice would you give to an aspiring fan who dream of turning their passion into a career in media or entertainment?
Yeah, well, I talked a little bit about the lessons that I've learned so far, but then I think one thing that's kind of like a silly thing is like even if you're like a fan of something, I think there's always like a line where you have to remain professional, where it's like I did an interview. I ended up like not taking the internship because it was the same semester that I got offered NBC. But I remember it was for well, I don't want to say what it was. It was for, I'll give a hint. It was for like a volunteer like community organization in which they do charity work and they often have celebrities and music artists come into the studio to perform, and it's sometimes like a spur of the moment thing, it's sometimes a surprise. And on the interview, I remember, I'll never forget, the interviewer, she asked me, well, who's your favorite like music artist or celebrity? And I was like, well, I thought it was like a real interview question. So I was like, I really like Harry Styles. I like his music because of this. You know, I was just talking. And then she said, so if you were interning for us and Harry Styles walked in the door, how would you act? And I literally had to be like, well, I would be very professional. I would ask, what is he here for? I would refer to my supervisor and say like, well, we have a visitor here. It's Harry Styles. I don't know. But I wouldn't like freak out, fangirl, go crazy. You kind of have to like, knowing that you're in those entertainment spaces, you kind of have to understand that. But then I also would say like, don't be ashamed to be a fan because sometimes it can help. Because if you're shy or like quiet and they're like trying to figure out like, say you are working at Columbia Records and they're trying to figure out like what's the best way to reach Harry Styles fans. Like make sure you're speaking up and make sure that you have that voice because you're like, okay, well, I know that when I used to be on Twitter with all of these people, they don't really like it when he just like drops a hint and disappears for weeks. Like maybe we should like shorten the time span of doing that. Like maybe we should do it this way or that way. You can bring like a new angle because you have that familiarity. Right. And so I think that's another like really important point.
Sounds very exciting. And I know from being your mom that you are well on your way to a successful career.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoy what I do for work now. And then I enjoy being able to talk about pop culture and entertainment still on this podcast. It's been such a great experience. But yeah, thank you so much. I hope that this interview was very engaging. And thank you, Mommy, for coming on the podcast.
Welcome. Yes, sweetie.
To all of you listeners out there, I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, our first ever full-time fan episode. I've always been so interested in this fangirl or fanboy to entertainment industry professional pipeline because, as we talked about a lot today, being a fan or having that background brings an added sense of understanding to really perform well in the entertainment world, especially in marketing, social media, public relations, and the many new roles under the new fan engagement bubble. In the future, I plan to interview more people who have turned their passion or love for music or television or film or theater into a full-time job, so we can learn from them, share career advice, or uplift other fans. So stay tuned for that, and if you think you're someone who fits this series well, let me know. I'd love to have you on. And stay tuned, because when I was prepping for season 3 of this podcast, I started brainstorming not only episode ideas, but just different series that I could start doing more regularly. So let me know, 1, if you like Full-Time Fan. But then 2, in the upcoming weeks, either next week or the next week, we'll be also launching a second series for the podcast that I'm super excited about. And I hope that these 2 new series can be fun staples for the podcast that I can kind of sprinkle in every once in a while. So yeah, stay tuned. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, tell a friend and make sure you let me know by leaving a review and following the podcast. As a reminder, at FanFave, it's all about the love for entertainment and the joy of being a fan. FanFave is active with even more content on social media, so make sure you don't miss anything. It's at FanFave Media everywhere. So connect with me because I want to hear from you, my fellow fans of pop culture. I'll see you next Tuesday when we'll dive into another aspect of pop culture. Thanks for listening and see you soon.